Yep. Welcome to the Fenton Lecture Series. Tonight we're going to talk about the 50th anniversary of the visit of the King of Sweden, Carl XVI Gustaf, in 1976 to the United States and to Jamestown. I'd like to thank Rogers Surveying, their sponsor for our program tonight, and all of our lectures. And I'd also like to encourage you to think about becoming a monthly donor to the Fenton. That goes along with our Vision 2030 program that we've been sharing in our newsletter and through email and such. So I just wanted to bring that up, and we have all the paperwork to go with those things if you're interested. I'm going to start by passing the hat, because we have to do that, and then I'm going to start the talk. Well, I'm Joni Blackman. I'm the executive director of the Fenton, and I had an interest in this visit of the king. I remember how excited my Aunt Jenny was about this. Matter of fact, after the visit, she framed the picture she took, and it sat in her living room the rest of her life. And we always knew who the king was, because it was Aunt Jenny. He was in Aunt Jenny's living room. So my first question to you is, were you there? And we're not there. Wrong one. Yoo-hoo. So were you there? If you were there, we'd love to hear your stories. And we have set up an email where you can send that to us so we can keep it for our archives. Now we do have a visitor here, Mrs. Reed. You raise your hand. And she dressed for the occasion, which we're really excited about. But she was there, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. She has a scrapbook with her that she created about his visit across the nation, and so we'll have a chance to look at that too. So the information, you can just put it in the chair. The information in tonight's talk and the accompanying exhibit, which I can't wait to show you, the information comes from Saga from the Hills, the book by M. Lorimer Moe. It comes from Post-Journal articles around the time of the king's visit, before and after, the Bradford Era newspaper, the Warren Times Observer newspaper, the Kane Republican, and then personal recollections that I have gathered from speaking to people. And thank you to Christy Herbst, who was a brand new reporter/photographer, I think, for that trip. And so she talked to me a little bit about what it was like. So when I started the project, I thought I could pick the brains of a number of local individuals. Like, for instance, Kurt Westrom told, oh, he'll know. No, he wasn't in town. Well, you can talk to so-and-so who was in the Norton's Women's Club. No, she was about 9 months, 1 minute pregnant. She was not there. Everybody that name they gave me, they were not there, or they weren't into their Swedish heritage at the time. So I was lacking in a lot of personal stories. Nancy Barger was one of the early reporters for the Post-Journal on that trip, and so I am going to catch up with her later on that. So I'm lacking in personal stories from those that were directly involved in setting up the long-awaited event, but the individuals who were setting it up, of course, were established individuals at the time. You know, there's a chair right up here. You know, they were in their mid-50s or so. They're not around anymore. So a lot of the information that I have tonight comes from a press packet that was put out and given put out by the Swedish Council and given to the Post-Journal, and that is in the exhibit as well. So first, a few things to know about King Carl XVI Gustaf, and his visit to America in 1976. Why did he come? What was he looking for? What was his government hoping to accomplish? The new king had only been king for about less than 3 years. He was crowned in September 1973, and he was 29 years old when he came to Jamestown. Carl Gustaf ascended to the throne upon his grandfather's death in September of 1973, and shortly after he became king, they changed the rules on him. There was a new instrument of government in 1974, and it took effect right about the time he came along, formally stripping the monarch of remaining executive powers. And as a result, Carl Gustaf no longer performed many of the duties normally accorded to a head of state in parliamentary regimes, such as the formal appointment of the prime minister, signing legislation into law, being commander-in-chief of the military. The new instrument explicitly limited the king to ceremonial and representative functions, while he retained the right to be regularly informed of affairs of state. Kind of like what the Queen of England and King of England situation is. And then I was reading a little more about this. I didn't quite understand it, but they took some of his robes away. So I mentioned that he was limited the king to ceremonial and representative functions. I think they took some of those ceremony functions away. So I guess the king had more time on his hands? I don't know. The king needed to prove he could be an effective goodwill ambassador according to the Consul of Sweden official. That's what was said. The U.S. and Sweden also differed on their viewpoints and actions during the Vietnam War, which caused tensions between our two countries. That's another reason they may have chosen for him to come here. And the exciting thing was, the world was all excited, the king was engaged. Just previous to his visit here on March 12th, 1976, I got that wrong, 76, he was engaged to West German commoner Sylvia Renati Somolath. The wedding was planned for June. I don't think this is the right date. I have to look up the date. But it was planned for like 3 years down the road at Stockholm Cathedral. It was a historic, wildly celebrated event marking the first marriage of a reigning Swedish monarch since 1797, making Sylvia the first commoner to become Queen of Sweden. Everybody was pretty excited, I guess. So, how it all started. How did he get to Jamestown, of all places? I'm going to move this eventually. According to Daniel A. Isaacson, the then Consul of Sweden in Jamestown, which was an unpaid position and probably still is, and King Carl XVI Gustaf's visit to America was planned well in advance. In hopes of getting the king to visit Jamestown, Congressman and former Jamestown Mayor Stan Lundin sent a letter, I assume to the Consul of Sweden. They don't say where he sent the letter. Sweden? I don't know where. Inviting the king to come to Jamestown to be a guest of the city and to attend a luncheon. Well, that's a long way to come for lunch. So through Mr. Isaacson, Congressman Lundin learned Jamestown was being considered. He needed to come to Jamestown. He knew about Jamestown because so many of our people had Swedish heritage. By June of 1975, Mr. Isaacson heard from the Consul General of Sweden in New York City, as kind of the head guy in our country for that. The king had accepted the invitation and wanted a public reception for all the citizens in the area to attend. A news release dated June 14th, 1975. So you can see once the king made a decision, things start to move along. It was still almost a full year before his visit. A news release dated June 14, 1975 from Mr. Isaacson's office announced the visit. Eventually, Dan Lincoln, who was the city historian at the time, he also was very involved in the founding of the Fenton History Center and a trustee, and he was one of the owners of Henderson Lincoln Funeral Home. He was appointed the media coordinator for the committee on arrangements. for the king's visit, and the chairman was Mr. Isaacson. You're going to hear a lot of the same names over and over and over. So the executive committee was organized that, and it consisted of Mr. Isaacson, Mayor Stephen B. Carlson, Congressman Stanley Lundeen, and eventually the committee was expanded, the Committee of Arrangements was expanded to include, okay, now turn your hearing aids up, there's a lot of names. Gustav A. Lawson and Jenny Vimmerstedt as honorary co-chairmen. That's how it was written as, chairmen. There's something I have to talk to you about, ladies, when we get going on this. It's interesting. So Gustav Lawson and Jenny Vimmerstedt had been awarded the Order of Vasa First Class, that's a knighthood, during King Gustav, must be the 15th, reign. So they were already knighted. So they were already on this committee. The co-vice chairmen, so we got the chairman, we got the big wigs are running it, Isaacson, Lundeen, Carlson. Then you have Gustav Larsson and Jenny Vimmerstedt. Then you have the co-vice chairman, Reggie Linnae and Russ Dietrich from our Parks Department, okay? You got the vision? Now we get into the people who do a lot of the work. No, they all did a lot of work, don't get me wrong. Security coordinator was Gunnar Kinberg, Kinky, from Jamestown Police Department. Other coordinators were, for travel, Edward Viersema, mass transport, that meant the buses, because there were a lot of buses, Edward Robertson. Interestingly, he was not Swedish. He was from the South. He had just moved here a few months prior to take over buses for, I don't know if it was Jarts at the time, I can't remember. So all of a sudden he's tasked with like managing 14 buses to move all these people all over the place when the king's there. The schools were managed by Dr. Timothy. Connection was Pauline Winger. Sugar Grove connection was Harvey Sandin, and Chandler's Valley, Pennsylvania's connection was Harold Griggs. So those are the people who are on the ground handling all the day-to-day, get it done, clean up the mess, you know, all of that. The mayor's luncheon was going to be handled by, these poor women did not have first names. Mrs. Wyman L. Ainsley, Jr. Co-chairmen were Mrs. John A. Nord, Mrs. Carl E. Bloomquist, Mrs. M. Lorimer Moe, Mrs. John L. Selstrom, and then Mrs. Roanne Isaacson squeaked in there with her first name. So that's Dan Isaacson's wife. Mrs. Dan Isaacson, Daniel. Cuisine was handled by Mark Pierzynski, and the decor for the luncheon was handled by Arthur Wellman. So they had big plans. The next year, on February 17th, 1976, Baron Nokhoff, that's a crazy name, Nokhoff, who was the Consul General for New York City, New York, visited Jamestown for one day to tour all the stops planned for the April 25th, 1976 visit. The meetings began at the airport. There were working meetings of the executive committee of, and I'm not going to do it, a lot of those names I just gave you. Also attending this meeting were representatives of the U.S. Secret Service, the FBI, and the Office of Protocol for the U.S. State Department. They worked through lunch provided by the Norden Club, whose president was Raymond Aum. But you know, the auxiliary did the food. The executive committee and staff traveled to the Hessel Valley Lutheran Church for a meeting that same day with its board of trustees. The lay minister was Donald Greendahl, who was a man from Jamestown, who was a car salesman, if I remember right, but he was their pickup minister. You know, he was the lay minister. Their pastor was Carl Nelson, and he was from Warren. Yeah. They didn't have their own people in place. They were borrowing folks because maybe they were a small group. And Mr. Monroe Passenger, chairman of its board of trustees. They returned to Jamestown after going to Hessel Valley Lutheran Church, to the Jamestown Community College, for, of course, guess, a coffee hour. Yes. Hosted by the Mayor's Luncheon Committee, headed by Mrs. Ainsley as chairman, where they met with all, and there was a long list, and I'm sorry I'm not going to drive you crazy with it. There was a long list of Swedish American organizations in the community who were involved in the planning. Any group that had any Swedish part was in this group. So it was like 25 names. The Consul General left Chautauqua County Airport at 5 o'clock. I'm sure he was pretty tired. A week later, on February 24th, 1976, it was announced that two prominent Jamestown citizens would receive the singular honor of knighthood from His Majesty Carl XVI Gustaf, King of Sweden. They were Reginald A. Linné, president of Blackstone Corporation, who we know also worked with Volvo and had businesses in Sweden and here, and Bert C. Bloomquist. And all they talked about was that he was retired, but he'd been very busy making friends on both sides of the ocean. They were to receive the decoration of the Royal Order of the North Star by decision of the King of Stockholm. That's our king. The greatest honor of all is that there were plans to have the king knight them himself. This is what was most unusual. In the past, it had always been done by someone else, someone he appointed. The press release stated this: these two gentlemen have and are contributing throughout their entire lifetimes the work, the materials, and the enthusiasm which has done much to cement the relationships of our two great nations. Not only the greater Jamestown area community itself, but throughout all of the United States and Sweden. In the works of the official language of the order itself, it's awarded with the object to recompense civic merits and the creation of new establishments of importance to the nation, said Consul Isaacson. He added, as General Chairman on arrangements for the King's visit, at the time we first learned last June that the King would be here, it was the recognition of these gentlemen's tremendous contributions and talents that prompted me to ask that they serve in the positions of co-chairman on my committee. Together with Mr. Gustav A. Lawson and Ms. Jenny Vimmerstead, as honorary chairman and honorary co-chairman, they're already holding the Royal Order of Vasa. My confidence in what all they have done, can do, and are doing, as well as the high regard in which they are held by the Swedish government, has been justified by this tremendous news. It's my understanding that these men were under consideration for this high honor before the plans were formulated for the King's visit. All right. All what you've been waiting for, I'm going to change the slide. According to the press program, which you'll see in the exhibit, the King's American itinerary was this. We're the only yellow spot, I'll have you know. April 2nd, 1976, the King arrived at JFK Airport. Now let me start over. I think what I want you to catch here is how busy this young man was. It was nonstop. The King arrived at JFK Airport, didn't give me a time, but then he immediately left for Williamsburg, Virginia, that evening at 5:15. He traveled to Brandon Plantation in Jamestown, near Jamestown, Virginia. Then he went to Mount Vernon. Then he went back to Washington, D.C. 2 days later, where he visited the National Air and Space Museum, Blair House. And by the way, when he was in D.C., he kept going back to Blair House. I don't know if that's where they had all the meetings, all the press conferences, I'm not sure, but they keep talking about going to Blair House. Had dinner at the Swedish ambassador's residence and slept at the Watergate Hotel. He visited many local museums, was honored at receptions, held innumerable press conferences, and then off to Philadelphia to see all the Revolutionary era sites. Next, he went to Gustavus Adolphus College in Minnesota. Then he went to Seattle, Washington. And there are things there that are Swedish-oriented that he saw in all these places. I just didn't want to burden you with all these names. So he goes to Seattle, Washington. Then he goes to San Francisco. Then he goes to Los Angeles, California, where he had dinner at Danny Kaye's house. Then he took a break to ski for 2 days in Vail, Colorado. Then he went to Lindsborg, Kansas to visit Bethany College. then to Rockford, Illinois to visit with the Swedish community, and by then he had a sore throat. He canceled the news conference. Headed off to Chicago, Illinois to attend the Ebenezer Lutheran Church on Easter Sunday. 400 people lined the street to see him. We put them to shame. He toured Augustana College in Moline, Illinois. Then he went to Detroit, Michigan, where he visited General Motors and the Ford Motor plants and met with Henry Ford II. The king was very interested in industry. He was also just as interested in modernizing agriculture. So he had an eye for moving his country forward, even though Sweden is pretty progressive already. He flew to Houston, Texas to tour the LBJ Space Center, then to Little Rock, Arkansas to visit with Mr. and Mrs. Winthrop Rockefeller at their farm. They must have met somewhere. Then to New York City for a Lincoln Center program, and then finally to Jamestown for 5 whole hours. Then back to New York City for a mayor's reception, a lunch given by the Secretary General of the UN, a reception by the American Scandinavian Foundation, and a visit to the New York Historical Society, which, by the way, we have Fenton things there, and dinner at the Swedish American Chamber of Commerce. On his last couple of days, he visited Boston and the Concord Bridge with a last luncheon in New York City by the Swedish American Chamber of Commerce, and home on April 30th. So he started April 2nd from Stockholm and ended back home April 30th. And by the way, April 30th was his 30th birthday. Happy birthday. I don't even know if he's awake. Phew. So, why did the king want to divert from all that chasing around and having a great time? Why did he want to divert from his national bicentennial trip to come to Jamestown? Well, 45% of Jamestown's population was of Swedish descent, and he knew that. All this information comes out of letters that are written back and forth between Isaacson and the Swedish council. And we were, and still are, intensely proud of our Swedish heritage. Sweden recognized this feeling from the great number of people who had been traveling back and forth between Jamestown and Sweden every single year. And Sweden was just one of 70 countries that came to visit us that year during our bicentennial. So, we could have had a different king if we wanted. Anyway, concentrating on the origins of the Swedish immigration to America, plans were made for the king to visit the oldest existing Lutheran church in the eastern United States, and that was Hessel Valley Church in Chandlers Valley, Pennsylvania. He knew that. So he knew he was going to end up in this part of the country anyway. So the king's delegation was 9 members of the royal party, which I'm not going to list all of them for you, the consulates general, 14 Swedish journalists, and 20 U.S. Secret Service agents who must have lost their minds, and a Swedish security officer. That's who came to Jamestown, along with all the other journalists. All right. Come on. Okay, it's fine. We're finally here. Do you feel like it's been a year already? According to Christy Herbst, from the retired editor, who was a new reporter and photographer at the time, everything was planned to the minute. Nancy, do you agree with that? Yes. She was on one of the press buses, as you were too, Nancy, in the King's motorcade, which had, from what I'm reading, 4 vehicles and 5 buses. Keeping that in mind, let me set the stage for you. So I'm going to quote a little bit from Saga from the Hills because they really capture the feeling of the day. The first ever visit to Jamestown by a reigning monarch was planned as the high point of the city's celebration of our nation's 200th birthday. A furious bit of temperamental western New York weather did its worst to unravel months of planning and preparation. It rained and rained. That is what anyone remembers when I say, were you there? The first thing they tell me is how wet and dreary it was. So, here we are at the airport, waiting for the king. You can see some important faces there. Douglas Allsted was there. He was he was on the program. Now, they had chairs set up for, hundreds were gathered at the airport to meet the king. The Jamestown concert band sat in the rain waiting. Come on. Waiting. And the Viking chorus apparently waited too. And they did not get the chance. All right. The well-planned day was put off schedule from the start. The 3 private planes, that's what Post-Journal reported, 3 private planes. The Bradford Era said there were 4. I don't know what happened, but I'm saying 3. Were supposed to land at the Chautauqua County Airport. However, while the first 2 landed as planned, the weather turned and an icy downpour started, and the last plane, which just happened to have the king on it, diverted to Bradford Airport, 50 miles away, because they had instrument landing equipment and Jamestown did not. So the Pennsylvania State Police had less than an hour to make plans to drive the king and his team to Chandler's Valley Hessel Lutheran Church. So you can see here, New York State Police are all of a sudden scrambling. Meanwhile, a caravan, so he's landing in Bradford. The state police are just grabbing anybody they can get and headed there, right? I can't imagine what the Secret Service is thinking. Meanwhile, a caravan of Secret Service agents that are already in Chautauqua County, the police and members of Jamestown's planning group took off for Warren, Pennsylvania in a motorcade, where they planned to meet the PA police cruisers carrying the king and his team. The local radio stations got a hold of it and alerted the local communities, and hundreds gathered along the side road, what was it, Route 59 or something down there, along the new route, and they huddled under umbrellas and makeshift tents to see the procession. Meanwhile, City of Warren police pulled in anybody who was cognizant that was on the police force. They were in jeans and T-shirts and everything else, directing traffic and at the intersections to make sure that the king could just, fly right through, right? So prior to all this, in anticipation of the king's original route from Jamestown to Chandler's Valley, Jackson Run Road from Chandler's Valley to Sugar Grove was paved, and the locals jokingly called it the King's Highway. However, with the change of plans, off-duty policemen, like I said, in blue jeans, covered the city of Warren and other intersections so the King's motorcade could make up time from Bradford to Chandler's Valley. They never took the King's Highway. So you got a great road for, no reason. Imagine the fun the King had flying through over these, Pennsylvania roads are fun to drive on. Can you imagine being in a police cruiser and able to go as fast as you want? Anyway, they arrived at the church. Come on. I'm not working. I'm on. There we go. They arrived at the church only 30 minutes late. Noon instead of 11:30. Unfortunately, they missed the sermon. It was only 7 minutes long. The special music that was put together by both a children's choir and an adult choir from lots of local community churches. And they've been practicing for months. So without the king there, they still had a nice service. The lay preacher, Donald Greendahl of Jamestown, gave a 7-minute sermon. He preached on John 20, because that's normally what he would preach on the Sunday after Easter. The church was full of invited guests, and Jan Johnson, who used to work for the mayor's office at the time, donated an invitation to that church service. It's a little late now, he can't go, but it's in pristine condition. So we got a lot more paper from the whole day, which is wonderful, thank you. So the church was full of invited guests and lots of people waiting outside. And after 15 minutes and the benediction, the king and his motorcade were on the road again. So here he is leaving the service. All right. While he was there, only a short while, apparently the planning committee was very relieved it was over with and it had been achieved. All right. So the motorcade proceeded as planned from Chandler's Valley to Sugar Grove through a bus ride to Jamestown via Forest Avenue. So I have a whole bunch of pictures here to show you Sugar Grove and Bust-I. So that says welcome to welcome to Sugar Grove, okay? And you can see how nasty it is. There's the bus. Oh, I know. I think Rick Roll, who, I have to tell you, these pictures came off of, I don't know what you call them, but they're negative prints. I don't know if that's the right word. They're the pictures, and they were all on pages. I should show you. They were pretty rough looking and pretty dark, and he scanned them and made them look and to have some kind of music or something there. And here comes the motor. People. Yeah, that is now a hair salon. I don't know who's in or out of the car. Past Wilcox Brothers, down the road, see you later. Only 2 pictures or so of Bust-I. So, Norman, I need your help on this. So they're entering Bust-I. It looks from Lawson Road.
Yeah, that's Francisco's store on the left where the fire department
Oh, okay.
parking lot is now. Where the people are, that's the triangle. The house is gone.
Okay.
And that must be the store beyond.
Yeah.
It looks like
it's not Forest Avenue, though, is it?
It looks backwards to me. It looks like
I know.
Going the wrong way.
I know. That's what I thought and especially when I looked at the next one.
But now that's definitely the store that's still, that's going in the right direction. There's the triangle on the left.
Okay.
And what's now the bake shop is the near right.
Right. Well, that station wagon, sorry guys, this has been bothering me for days. So the station wagon is right there. See that station wagon by the tree? Yeah. There's that station wagon by the tree. Oh, yeah. But yet, so he's further down the road. That's the only point I can make, I think. Further down the road. In the meantime, this is great right here.
Looking down Mill Road.
Yeah. All along the route, school bands played for the motorcade. Bands from Faulkner Central School, Lincoln, and Washington Junior High Schools played. Swedish-American bicentennial flags lined the route to Jamestown, and the children held flowers. In Bust-I, the Firemen's Auxiliary, the women, served coffee and donuts to people who came to see the king. Some of the women of Bust-I made Swedish flags to place along the American flags throughout the hamlet.
Lots of flags.
Yeah, and the Lakewood Memorial Post provided a color guard at the Bust-I Triangle. I'm not sure that's them. Despite the weather, the spectators increased. Now, I think that's just leaving Bust-I, because there is a church steeple in the back there that
Well, just this way, the library and the bake shop, and that, I think that the next house. I could be wrong because it's very limited view there.
There's a church steeple right above that umbrella that I couldn't place.
No, that's confusing.
We'll talk about it later. Anyway, they're on their way to Jamestown. I know that. So coming into Jamestown, Forest Avenue, and that's another thing people tell me. Oh, we went and stood on Forest Avenue in the rain. Okay, it's getting more people. All right. Then they finally get to Jamestown, and when they got there, they figured about 8,000 visitors were crowding Tracy Plaza and the parking ramps. Oh, wait a minute, yeah. The king was scheduled for a whole 5 minutes with the children's luncheon, 12:55 to 1 o'clock. And there were 30, this is what the paper reported, and I heard different information from Scott Axelson. Is that the name? Axelson? He was there as a middle school student, and how old were you when you were there? What's that? 10th grade, so you were older. He thought he thought there were like 1,000 people there. I mean, it was really busy. The paper reported that there were 30 students from local elementary, junior, and senior high schools. You think that's about right? Oh, maybe.
One from every class. One from every grade.
Well, they said they were chosen one per grade to attend the special luncheon because they were good citizens, or, oh yeah, I want to show you the buses lined up there. There's all the people waiting. He looks like he's picking a fight. Hold on, I'll get through it. There's the band. Waiting. Okay, here we are. The children were chosen, one per grade, to attend the special luncheon because they were good citizens or had written a contest-winning essay on the king's visit or on Sweden. The essays were printed in a book and given to the king by 7-year-old Debbie King. Do you think they picked her because of her name? Debbie King of Jamestown. She graduated, when would you figure that out? 1985 from Jamestown High School. We couldn't find her after that. He spent 15 minutes with the children. Sounded like he really liked talking to them and hearing what they had to say. Returning to the formal mayor's luncheon at 1:30, again, about 30 minutes late. All right, so we're setting it. This is done the day before, of course. I just wanted to show you what the table looked like. There's some important people who did something important. Okay, good to know. Carol Nord on the left. Okay. See, this is the other thing. I don't know who all the names are. All right, this one. Who is this gentleman on the right? Oh, that's Ray Olm. Okay. I couldn't figure out who that was because it's just President across the way from him. I don't know who the woman is either. Oh, yeah, I never even thought of that. So the lunch was brisk. The king was concerned, drenched thousands waiting for him to appear. So after toasts were exchanged, the luncheon was served. The menu was fresh Hawaiian pineapple wedge, spring salad greens with alfalfa sprouts, sherried French dressing, filet of beef country style, brown rice souffle, limpa rolls, squash bread, I'm not sure what that would taste like, and mocha ice cream torte with Kahlua sauce for dessert. The king cut short the luncheon after the main course because he was concerned still about those in the rain, and that had been happening all day. So the Secret Service was trying to keep the group on schedule. So they never even got their Kahlua sauce. He basically said, we're going outside. And at 3:02, the paper reports, they went outside. And he was still running 30 minutes late. So, and as if by design, Saga reports that the rain stopped. And the king emerged onto the plaza. The crowd broke into the king's song. Now, I should have this with me, but I don't have the program for the day in front of me. It's in the exhibit. And it probably was in that. Sets of lyrics, because there was a lot of singing happening through this whole thing. So everyone started singing the king's song. See, they're singing right there. They're all singing.
The king's song was in English?
Yes, it's in English in the booklet. I don't know how they knew this. Was it like Mary Had a Little Lamb? I don't know what the tune was, but they all were singing. And the sun smiled tentatively through widening cracks in the ominous cloud cover, per the saga. Sheltered under a canvas canopy, the JHS band, which had been entertaining the crowd while all this was going on, moved off of those bleachers to make way for the mixed chorus of 100 voices that were selected from the city's Swedish churches. They were trained and led by Gerald Haglund. I don't have a picture of them. After a few songs, Russell Dietrich introduced the Master of Ceremonies, Honorable Stan Lundeen. U.S. Congressman and Toastmaster, and then Reverend Dr. Wilton E. Bergstrand gave the invocation, speaking in both Swedish and English, and there he is. Not speaking, but walking. Then the choir sang again, with 2 solos by tenor Douglas Allsted of the Metropolitan Opera Company and Jamestown native. Mr. Moe, author of Saga from the Hills, suggested that this was Mr. Allsted's proudest moment. I don't know if Mr. Allsted said that. Mayor Stephen B. Carlson gave the high school band again, and Mr. Jeffrey Corbin directing, and then Mr. Daniel Isaacson, there's the man. Mr. Daniel Isaacson, Consul of Sweden in Jamestown, and the immediate chairman introduced the royal party. All those folks I mentioned. More music by the choir and the presentation of the gifts to the city, to the king from the city. It was a miniature replica of the portage sculpture. It was given to the city. It used to sit in Tracy Plaza. It looks like a canoe up on stilts. It was given to the city in 1971 by the Jamestown Rotary Club. And then there was a miniature of the King's Chair created by Union National, and we have our version of the King's Chair. It's in the exhibit. His chair was inscribed with his name and the date of his visit to Jamestown. Come on. Finally, the king gets up to say something. And you can see the wind is blowing. I mean, look at the guy in the back, his hair. He's the consul. Now, come on, show some respect. He's the consul of Sweden from New York City. It's Mr. Knockoff. If I say that wrong, I'm sure. So the king gets up, and some of his most remembered remarks are, "I'm happy to be in Jamestown." He didn't say finally, but you could feel it, I'm sure. "I'm happy to be in Jamestown. I do feel at home here. I almost feel like being back in like I'm back in Sweden. I've seen your beautiful country from the East Coast to the West Coast, and I'm deeply impressed. I bring you greetings from Sweden. I congratulate you on your bicentennial celebration. I am proud of what Swedish immigrants did in building this country of countries. I understand about 50% of the total population of Jamestown has Swedish ancestors. Good Swedes have become good Americans. Jamestown is a place to come back to." And that crowd goes wild. Okay. And that is remarked on in the newspaper afterwards. People say quite a bit that they liked that he said Jamestown was a place to come back to. The king then knighted 2 Jamestown men. I don't have a picture, unfortunately, of Bert Bloomquist being knighted, but I do have a picture of Reginald Linnaeus. They were knighted with the Royal Order of the North Star, which is right there, for their contributions to the Swedish way of life. This was like I said, it was quite an event because the king actually gave the knighthood. Usually it's not given by him. Also interesting is that Reginald Linnaeus' father, Oscar, was also a recipient of the same knighthood previously. And according to saga, the climax of the ceremony was when King Carl presented the rare Linnaeus gold medal, a gold medal from the Swedish Academy of Sciences, to author, illustrator, and naturalist Dr. Roger Torrey Peterson. And there he is with his wife, Virginia, for his exceptional insights in his many literary works. Peterson had been a guest of the king in the royal palace just a few months earlier. Following that, the king presented medals to the 3 members, remember those top guys? 3 members of the Jamestown Arrangements Committee that planned the significant visit. Mayor Carlson, Mr. Dietrich, and Consul Isaacson for outstanding service. And that's Mr. Isaacson. And I think that's Russ Dietrich, but I'm not positive. Yeah. Okay. You can just see him going, oh. Anyway, the ceremony wrapped after that with the singing of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, with the audience joining in on the final chorus. And it was 4 p.m. He was only half an hour late. The king and his party headed to the airport. The heavens opened at 4:20 p.m. and just dropped a cloudburst of rain. And many were still celebrating the great day. They were caught in the downpour. I don't have too much after this to show you, but there's lots of comments. So from the crowd, they heard, "I never," said Robert Lundgren of Broadhead, as an immigrant in 1928. "I did so want to shake his hand," said Linus Carlson of West Ellicott. Many had seen the king as the crown prince on their trips back and forth to Sweden. They called him their king. Oliver T. Carlson of Forest Avenue, originally from Smolin, called the visit a great privilege for Jamestown. And Sidney Chase of Faulkner said it was the grandest thing that could have ever happened. The July 4th Times visit, and this was their take on what Jamestown. There are regional flags. The daily Swedish special at Bertil Johnson's restaurant Avenue is wonderful. The consulate plaque outside of Mr. Isaacson's law office. They also noticed that there were 2 Swedish lodges downtown, you Vikings and Toolies, and the sun at the end of many names. There are 900 Johnsons to only 300 Smiths in the telephone book. And most of the Johnsons aren't related. That's New York City's take on us. I'm sure the visit touched the majority of homes in Jamestown. This is my opinion. I'm sure the visit touched the majority of homes in Jamestown and the surrounding area. I know my family visited. I told you the story about my great aunt. The king's visit was the talk of the town for weeks. You remember Jim Abdella? Well, he was a voracious writer. Jim was a local attorney, and he wrote a chatty column in the Mayville Sentinel, published on May 6th, 1976, so we're talking, a week or so later. He wrote, "Our sizable family," and he put in parentheses, 3 teenagers, returned from vacation just in time to be swept up in the electric excitement of the visit by the King of Sweden. Now you have to understand, as he'll tell you later on, they are all non-Swede. They're as Italian, Sicilian as you can get. With thousands of others, he came for the event. With thousands of others, we came out for the event, the Abdellas. Seldom can I recall something which caught the imagination of so many of those in the area. He went on to praise the media coverage, the detailed time schedule, the excellent luncheon, the tight security precautions. Our totally non-Swedish family, quote, found everything just a beautiful experience for the entire community. He praised the Post-Journal for the efforts they put into the last-minute publication. And again, that'll be in the exhibit. There's an original, and then I've got a copy of one you can look at. But there was an insert. You saw those, the Post-Journal carriers, okay? They were selling in a special that day, dated that day, that even was so up to date, it talked about how the plane had been diverted to Bradford. That's how late in the day that had to be printed. Yeah, to reach. So he was remarking about how much effort the Post-Journal and their staff put into making sure everything was up to date. So he praised the Post-Journal for the efforts they had put into the last-minute publication, and I got a lot of this information out of that. They covered the Bradford Airport diversion. He goes on to write, quote, "The public thought so much of the Post-Journal's efforts at the extra," that's the insert I was talking about, "that many could be seen giving $1 to the carriers when the cost was only 25 cents. So I'm hoping the kids made 75 cents. He did report some negative reactions that were mostly pointed at spending money on the bicentennial in 1976, and the country was coming out of a recession and was dealing with very high unemployment. And then we also had budget shortages locally. But overall, the sweet taste of the whole affair lingers on. And that was the day. And I'm sure everybody went home to bed. So thank you for your time. I do want to capture any of your stories. You can use the email I showed you, and we have also paper, a form you can fill out. And Mrs. Reed is going to show us her scrapbook here in a few minutes, I think. Do you have any questions? I'm not sure I can answer them, but any thoughts?